It runs for 964 miles. From the mega city of Chicago on Lake Michigan to the bayous of Louisiana right outside New Orleans in the heart of the Deep South. Following along the Mississippi River for most of its length, this route is a crucial corridor for the movement of goods, people, and services throughout the interior of the United States. So what is it like to drive on I-55? What can you expect to see? On this video, we're going to take a look. The origins of I-55 can be traced back to the famous Route 66. Route 66 was the highway that connected Chicago to St. Louis. And when the Federal Aid Highway Act came into existence, its days were numbered as it provided funding for an interstate highway to replace the route. Due to the superior condition of US 66 compared to other routes, it was among the last to be upgraded to interstate, but eventually the time came. Much of I-55's route between St. Louis and Chicago directly replaced US 66, oftentimes using the same roadbed. It was completely replaced by the late 1970s. Though today, many old signs and landmarks of the old Route 66 can still be found. In Missouri, most of the route was constructed in the 1960s with the portion in the St. Louis area partially replacing US 66. South of St. Louis, it was built along the old US 61 corridor. Construction in Arkansas was also completed at this time, which also followed the US 61 corridor. Like in Missouri, a bypass was built around Blytheville while US 61 provides direct access to the city. In Memphis, I-55 uses the Memphis, Arkansas Bridge to cross the Mississippi River. This bridge was opened in 1949 and predates the interstate highway system, as you can tell from its tight design. It was given a waiver to be incorporated into the interstate highway system rather than constructing an entirely new bridge. In Mississippi and Louisiana, I-55 was built along the US 51 corridor, heading towards New Orleans rather than following the US 61 corridor towards Baton Rouge. And by the 1970s, the route was completely done between Chicago and New Orleans. Alright, so now what is it like to drive on Interstate 55? For this one, we're going to go from north to south, meaning we're going to start right off with a banger, Chicago, Illinois. In Illinois, I-55 runs approximately 294 miles. Coming up Lakeshore Drive, our first indicator of I-55's presence is this junction sign 1 mile south of it. More and more of the beautiful Chicago skyline becomes visible as we approach, and then we see it with the control city for St. Louis. I gotta give Illinois credit for using St. Louis as the control city, as some other states would have used Springfield instead over a city in another state, despite most people using I-55 to get to St. Louis. Almost immediately after I-55 begins, we are faced with this large interchange complex with the Dan Ryan Expressway. It has the states of Indiana and Wisconsin listed as controlled states rather than controlled cities. In Chicago, I-55 is known as the Stevenson Expressway, named after the former Illinois governor. The Stevenson is one of the few non-tolled interstates in the Chicago area and provides 6 general-purpose lanes for travel in this area. You can expect traffic to be heavy during most times of the day if you come through here. Chicago interstates are usually congested, and this one is no different. Our next major interchange is with the Tri-State Tollway, or Interstate 294. It has the same control states as the Dan Ryan, Indiana to the south, Wisconsin to the north. We are officially in suburbia at this point, as most of the urbanized part of Chicagoland is in the rear view. After this interchange, the Stevenson was renamed to the Barack Obama Presidential Expressway for the former president. Say goodbye to Cook County, because we are now in DuPage County, second most populous in the state after Cook. Illinois keeps the roadway at 6 lanes through here, and overall it was in pretty good condition. At the end of DuPage, we meet Interstate 355, which is tolled. It has the properly named controlled cities of northwest and southwest suburbs. How about that? Entering Will County, we bypass Joliet to the west, the third largest city in the state. 6 lanes are maintained throughout the area, and we have a standard cloverleaf interchange with Interstate 80, which is signed for Indiana and Iowa. Man, Illinois does a really impressive job when it comes to choosing its control cities, eh? Interstate 80 also marks the end of the 6-lane portion of Interstate 55 out of Chicago. We had a good run. After crossing US 6, almost 50 miles outside of downtown Chicago, we are finally beginning to escape its enormous gravity. This interchange with Arsenal Road is particularly interesting as it does not cross the interstate, but instead runs alongside it. Through these industrial areas of Will County, I-55 has been outfitted with Texas-style frontage roads. And now here we can say welcome to rural Illinois. After bypassing a few small towns, we reach Pontiac. Pontiac, Illinois was actually named after the same Native American war chief that Pontiac, Michigan was named for. Our next city of significance is Bloomington, home of State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there, or so they say. Bloomington sits side by side with the city of Normal, which from looking at the map from a distance, you probably think this was just one big city. In Bloomington, Interstate 55 terminates I-39 and has a short concurrency with I-74 around the western side of the city. We get 6 lanes here, and I-74 can take you to Indianapolis, while we will continue south towards St. Louis and Springfield. There is also a business I-55 or Green 55 through this area that travels along the old Route 66. Fun fact about this curve on Business 55 is that it was designed for speeds up to 100 miles per hour, as it was intended as an upgrade to bring US 66 up to interstate or Autobahn standards at the time. After passing by more farmland and the town of Lincoln, named for the late president, we approach the city that's the only thing standing between Chicago and complete domination of Illinois, the capital of Springfield. In Springfield, we encounter Interstate 72, a short interstate that just briefly enters into Missouri to prevent it from being an intrastate highway. I-72 briefly rides along with us around Springfield before we leave to head due south towards St. Louis. Springfield can be seen as somewhat of the midway point between Chicago and St. Louis. The city limits reach all the way south beyond Lake Springfield before finally letting you go. Things go quiet again on this 4-lane rural freeway until you encounter Interstate 70 and its spawn, Interstate 270. I-270 serves as a northern bypass around St. Louis for east-west travelers, while I-70 eastbound heads to Indianapolis, and I-70 westbound joins us on our journey to St. Louis proper. Despite I-55 and I-70 being major interstates, we are still at 4 lanes for now on this concurrency. Further along, we meet another auxiliary route, Interstate 255, which along with Illinois 255 forms an eastern bypass of St. Louis for those traveling north-south. When combined with I-270, it forms a complete beltway around St. Louis. After I-255, we have our 6 lanes. However, in this area, all the goodwill that Illinois earned in the Chicago area is lost. The roadways in this area are beaten and worn into oblivion, some of the worst you'll find on the interstate system. There are some Route 66 landmarks in the area that you should check out if that's your thing. In the suburb of East St. Louis, we meet I-64 at this giant succession of interchanges where Interstate 70 departs to the west and I-64 joins for the final crossing into St. Louis. The roadway on the interstates in East St. Louis look as bad as the condition of the city itself. This St. Louis suburb has certainly seen better days, and it's clear that Illinois has little interest in maintaining the roads out here. To soften the blow on your suspension, you are getting a nice view of the Gateway Arc and the St. Louis skyline. Crossing the mighty Mississippi, we see signage for Interstate 44 for Tulsa and Memphis, with Kansas City accessible through I-70. Missouri welcomes you. In Missouri, I-55 runs for around 210 miles. We enter St. Louis, elevated above the downtown streets. Busch Stadium, as well as other major structures, are visible to the right. The roadway is in much better condition in St. Louis than what Illinois had in East St. Louis. After a brief concurrency with I-44, we depart alone as we travel south through St. Louis along the Mississippi River. From this point on out, the Mississippi River is never too far from I-55. I-55 is 6 to 8 lanes through here, but there appeared to be a major construction project going on when I was there. At exit 201, we are outside of St. Louis proper and in St. Louis County. St. Louis is one of those city-county equivalent cities with a tiny land area relative to its metro area. Overall, the traffic in St. Louis is quite the change from Chicago. For the most part, things are smooth flowing all throughout here, making it a place to consider moving if time and traffic is a big concern to you. The southern interchange with I-270 and I-255 marks the point where we are beginning to escape the St. Louis area. This is a pretty well-designed interchange with auxiliary lanes separating from the main roadway well before we enter the main crossing. The control city for us is Memphis because what else would it be? It doesn't die down into farmland just yet after this, as there is still plenty of suburbia around us, but the more urban part of the metro area is behind us. We still have a few big boxes like Lowe's and Walmart to pass by first before we escape. The development finally quiets down after the suburban city of Festus. The roadway is now a rural 4 lanes with some interesting terrain between us and the Mississippi. Those wanting to try their luck can hop off on the exit to Cape Girardeau to hit up the casino. Otherwise, we continue towards Memphis. Near Minor, Missouri, we encounter I-57, a little brother route that has been running somewhat parallel to us as it also leads north back to Chicago. However, instead of Memphis and St. Louis, it connects Chicago with Little Rock, Arkansas. Or at least, that's the plan for it one day. For right now, it terminates at the interchange with I-55 and has a giant gap to fill between here and Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. Looks like Missouri has some work to do to finish it. South of here, there is a business I-55 loop which takes you down to New Madrid. Aside being known for the fault line that can and has caused major earthquakes, this area is known for the Kentucky bend of the Mississippi River. The river bends here to form an exclave of Kentucky that is separate from the rest of the state and only accessible through Tennessee. Pretty interesting stuff. In Haiti, Missouri, that is, not that Haiti that you may be thinking of, we have Interstate 155. This spur route runs across the river to Dyersburg, Tennessee. Choose wisely here, as you will not be able to cross the Mississippi again until a good 90 miles from now in Memphis. Shortly after this interchange, we enter Arkansas. Arkansas has 72 miles of Interstate 55, and in Arkansas, I-55 immediately gains frontage roads. Now, they don't last that long, but you can see the influence on Arkansas from its large neighbor to the west. It's all quiet after here as we follow along the river until reaching West Memphis, Arkansas. This area is significant in that it is the junction of I-55 and I-40. Memphis in itself is a major transportation hub, and as such, you will have all the truck stops and related amenities off the interstate here that you may need. Arkansas has outfitted the roadway with service roads to access those amenities as well. Along with I-40, we have a bunch of U.S. highways concurrent in West Memphis. Out here, I-55 is also known as the Blues Highway, as US 61 runs concurrently with it. At the split, both I-55 and I-40 are signed for Memphis, with I-40 also having Nashville, while I-55 has Jackson, Mississippi. After the split with I-40, we cross the outdated and substandard Memphis-Arkansas Bridge into Tennessee. The subsequent substandard interchange with Crump Boulevard, along with this bridge, are in the process of being replaced, so the suffering will be ending soon. Interstate 55 has its shortest miles in Tennessee, with only 12 miles of roadway. I-55 travels along the southwestern edge of Memphis and features 6 travel lanes. Once US 61 leaves, we no longer have the Blues Highway label, and the next interchange is with I-240. I-240 runs north back towards downtown, or you can access southeastern Memphis with it. Even though Google Maps has jumped the gun, I-69 is not yet signed in Memphis, but in the future this will indeed be a concurrency with I-55. I-55 through the rest of Memphis is a pleasant drive with 8 general purpose lanes, along with an HOV lane with rush hour restrictions. Once you cross the state line into Mississippi, I-69 becomes official, and we are on a concurrency with the partially completed superhighway. I-55 has its second longest section in Mississippi with 290 miles. The first city in Mississippi is South Haven, a popular suburb of Memphis and the 3rd largest city by population in Mississippi. Lanes begin to drop as we head further south, and eventually we come to I-269, the outer beltway of Memphis. I-269 is signed for Collierville, while I-69 departs and heads for Tunica. Now, this section from the Memphis area to Jackson is quite boring in terms of scenery. I've driven it so many times. However, I'd say it's one of the more peaceful drives as you can just sit back, relax, and drive. No lane drops, very few state troopers, not even that much left lane hogging in my experience. Once you reach Canton, you are finally re-entering civilization. Noteworthy here is the massive Nissan plant off the interstate, featuring one of the largest parking lots known to man. This interchange with Soul Road is rather unique as well. It's not every day that you see a partial cloverleaf combined with a partial diamond. But hey, I guess it works. Heading into Jackson, I-55 is 6 lanes and modern, along with well-maintained pavement. Now, I've ragged on Interstate 20 in Jackson in the past, but they do a good job at taking care of I-55 north of I-20. Driving through the Jackson suburbs, it looks just like the suburbs you can find on the outskirts of every other American city. Now, for our short concurrency with I-20, the pavement was quite rough. Though I saw some construction barriers when I last drove through, so there may be some improvements that have happened since then. I-55 is signed with our final control city of New Orleans on the left exit from I-20. Interstate 55 maintains 6 lanes until Sewell Road, and if you need any more proof that this is the most important highway in Mississippi, just look at the condition of it compared to I-20 to see where the state invests more of its money. Mississippi signs Macomb along with New Orleans as a control city, despite it only having 12,000 people. But hey, I guess you have to give a little exposure to your own towns when possible. Next up is Louisiana, the final state for I-55. Here in Louisiana, it runs for almost 66 miles. You'll see a sign saying "Welcome to Louisiana" in English as well as in French, owing to its French colonial roots. Throughout northern Louisiana, we travel west of small towns such as Independence and Amite City before reaching Interstate 12 in Hammond. Interstate 12 is signed for Baton Rouge and Slidell, while I-55 continues toward New Orleans. To the south of Hammond, we briefly gain frontage roads for access, and they drop before entering the Louisiana swamps. The final miles of I-55 feature elevated bridges over the swampland to the west of Lake Pontchartrain. Some impressive engineering was required to build interstates through this terrain. Approaching I-10, we see signage for I-10 east to New Orleans or west to Baton Rouge. The Baton Rouge exit also allows access to US 51 for Laplace. And continuing on the ramp, we merge into I-10 for New Orleans. I didn't see an I-55 end sign the last time I was there. And even though I-55 doesn't reach New Orleans proper, it is a part of the New Orleans metro area. So, welcome to New Orleans, the end of I-55. All right, folks, that is Interstate 55, the highway of the heartland. With all these major inland logistical hubs, I'd probably say it's the most important north-south corridor that doesn't cross over into Mexico or Canada. Have you ever been on this highway? If so, which parts? Where do you think it needs improvements? Or do you think it's good as is? Which part of I-55 do you think is the worst? And which part do you think is the best? Let me know down below in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.